I'm clicking.
Hey guys, what's going on? This is the Lifestyle Series podcast. And as usual, we have me, Jess, and beautiful Christina. But Phil was not able to join us today. But don't worry, we have pretty awesome Tyler, who has not been on the podcast in a hot minute. What's going on?
Just happy to be here. Super excited to chat with all of you and dive into an awesome topic today.
Yeah, and we have Danica because we are going to be talking about body image perception versus reality. And Danica is a fantastic, obviously, person to talk about this with us, being our mindset coach here at ProPhysique. How are you, Danica?
I'm doing good. I'm excited for this topic.
Yeah. I mean, we usually do a win and a want, but I feel like with four of us, that'll take a while. So I don't know. It's been also a bit of a whirlwind.
Yeah.
So I don't know, Christina, how do you feel about just like getting to it? Because I feel like there's a lot that we can talk about here.
Yeah, no, let's just dive right in, I think. So, Danica, you want to kick us off with like what first, because you said you were so excited for this one. So like, what's the first thing that came to mind that you would want to jump into with this topic?
I feel like there's so many different ways that we could go with this one, but I think that maybe we can just go from what we all think, like our kind of definition of body image, and then when do we feel that it actually starts, like develops, like our sense of self, and when do we feel like it develops?
Oh, wow, we're going deep right away.
Right. Have you seen?
I'm like, I don't know.
They have that data. I forget where it came from, but like they looked at something saying that it starts at like age 8 for girls or something like that, where they start looking at their bodies and saying that something's wrong or thinking that they need to diet and things like that. And so, which is crazy that like that young, and especially since 3 of us have little girls, right? Like to be thinking about that kind of stuff, like it's just bonkers that it goes so early.
Yeah, it starts really, really early. And that is when we're starting to like view ourselves in comparison to others. But as young as age 3 is when we start to kind of look around us and see how we should exist in the world. Like, what is our place in the world? And that comes from like modeled behavior around us and the language that's used. It can go, I mean, as simple, which is really ridiculous, but as simple as like the television shows that we watch, and like there are some things that if I go back to my childhood, like cartoons, that I think about and I'm like, ooh, I wonder if that does really have an impact at such a young age. But it does. And the toys that we play with, not that we need to like not play with toys, not watch cartoons, all of that stuff. It
Right.
just has an impact on like our sense of self as early as age 3.
Yeah, it's kind of funny that you mentioned that, because I've even noticed, I have a 2.5-year-old and she's playing, with her dolls or, her babies, and she's talking to them, and I'm noticing like language that we use around her, she's starting to use with them as well. Like we've, going through potty training and stuff like that. And she's like reenacting that kind of stuff that we do with her babies already at 2.5. And so that's already like on my mind of like paying attention, how we talk, how I talk to her, and just how we interact, because yeah, it does happen so soon. I found that pretty wild and quite surprising, being a first-time parent.
Yeah, I think the like language that we use with ourselves is really like, we don't think about it a lot. I mean, I do, because this is what we do, truly. But I've found that, when clients check in, and they're usually using certain language, like that is the first thing that I will call out. I don't even care about any kind of progress necessarily that they're making, because I feel like a lot of the time the mind needs to be in a good place in order for the body to follow. And if you're constantly speaking to yourself in like negative ways, you're going to act a certain way.
Yeah.
And so I always say, okay, like think about your highest self. What would that person like think? How do they speak? How do they act? How do they talk to themselves? How do they talk to others? And start embodying that, because if you are someone who believes or speaks to yourself like you're bad at running, you're never going to get this down, you can't control your appetite, you can't control your food, I like looking a certain way in the mirror, I'm always going to have love handles, I'm always going to be jiggly, blah blah blah. Of course you are. Of course you're going to be that person. Whereas instead of, you need to like shift that language that you use with yourself. And I mean, you guys are all parents, but so many people are obviously parents. I am not. But it can really trickle down as well. And then, have those little ones kind of look up to you. Like I have nieces that, okay, that's a lie. I have a niece. And I'm always really conscious, or at least, when she was younger and we would be having dinner or whatever, I would always be really conscious about how I was speaking to myself, because to be honest, like my mom-in-law and like my sister-in-law at the time were not speaking to themselves in really positive ways. So I would always try to like be the opposite of that.
Right. I had a client, gosh, maybe 2 years ago, where with every check-in, she would send like a cartoon, like a random like animated picture or something of something fat. Like it would literally be like a whale or like a fat cat or like some cartoon of like something fat, and every single check-in she would send that and apologize for how fat she was. And like, and this was somebody who was very fit, carried a lot of muscle, but was unhappy with where they were and wanted to be leaner. And so she would always try to make it like lighthearted. And for the first couple of months, like 2 months, I would comment on it every time and try to be like not make a big deal about it, but be like, I don't love this. And I wish we weren't like looking at ourselves this way, or like poking at like fun at it this way or something. And then it just kept like almost getting like weird is the wrong word, but like the relationship
Uncomfortable.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
so eventually I was just like, if it keeps going this way, I'm going to have to say that this probably isn't the best coaching relationship. And you probably need to start looking for somebody else to support you in this body image like situation, and stop focusing so much on aesthetics, because this is not healthy. And this is not the way that you should be looking at yourself. And I think a lot of people will go that route where they try to make it like self-deprecating, where it's like, if I make fun of myself first, then nobody else will say something about it. But exactly like you said, if you're leaning into all the negativity, whether you're trying to laugh and be silly about it, or you're just straight up like, I hate this about my body, and getting mad at it or something, it's not going to help you change your relationship with food, the gym, or your body. And it's not going to help you all of a sudden have something else pop up on your body that you're like, oh, but I do like that, if you're constantly focusing on the negative. Whereas like, it's almost one of the things that like postpartum I've found can be kind of cool. And I mean, I can say this because I've done it 4 times, but you do end up in this place where your body is like pretty foreign to you, and it's like it's squishy and weird, and nothing works or feels right and stuff like that. But changes do happen, like even if it's not as fast as we want them to, they do happen pretty consistently that you can like watch. And I've done it where I was frustrated with it the whole time, and like, oh, when will I ever get back to normal, and like focus that way. And then I've had the benefit the last 2 times of instead being like, looking at it more of like, oh, my shoulders are starting to pop through more. Like I'm starting to see more like quad line, and trying to get excited about whatever it is that is starting to like be unveiled the way that I want it to be. And it completely changes the experience. And I think that's something that like I definitely try and do with all clients, is where like I try not only to, especially like ones who I seem to have issues with like body image and stuff, I try to highlight something in their pictures that I just think is so awesome. And I also always try to focus on something that has absolutely nothing to do with their pictures, their weigh-in, or their measurements or something to talk about as awesome, like about them. And even if it's just a quick like line about like, your bathroom is cute, like in the background of the pictures or whatever, you know what I mean? To try and take that focus off of what they are generally uncomfortable with, because I'm sure you guys hear it a lot where they'll be like, they apologize about something. Like we're, in this career so that we can open up our email and be like, oh, I have to shield my eyes or something. Like that's not what we're doing. Right. But
yeah. And if your coach is like that, fire them.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. And then like make a big deal about it somewhere. So we all know.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm on Reddit and I creep on Reddit sometimes. So I know about all the things.
Ugh.
Reddit speaks the truth.
Yeah.
We know I'm lying. But yeah, I like to have my clients say like wins for the week. Like I want to hear at least 2. Like you can pull out 2, right? That are something that is positive. But it can be really hard when you're trying to pick out something about your physique when you don't feel good about yourself. And know that like, just because you feel crappy about yourself, like that's okay. Like that's an emotion, like that's okay to have. But you shouldn't stay there. But it can be hard to like pull out something that is positive. So I like how, yeah, it's like start small, start with something that's not body related, start with something that is like how you manage something, or how you like have an outfit that you feel good in, or you went to the gym and you felt muscles that you've never felt before, or just like something very small, or the way that you responded to something, right? It could be something like that. I don't know how to, like Tyler and Danica also, I would love to hear about like how would you start helping a client like that, like progress towards more positivity, because you don't want to fake it.
No, and like I think in like performance-based stuff, like have them start focusing on that kind of thing in the gym, because physical changes can take a while. Whether, you're dieting, a pound a week, it still can take some time. You're going to have your ups and downs with, especially in our lifestyle, like things are just going to sometimes not move. So having them focus on performance. So like I'll have people, hey, let's focus on 10 body weight pull-ups, or I want to squat X amount of weight, or things like this, because I think what I also find is that a lot of that negativity reinforces bad behavior, which then now just takes them even longer to get to where they want to go, because they're almost just relying on that motive, that, that short-term motivation of, okay, well, now I'm going to do this, I'm going to see all these changes. And then they don't see maybe necessarily a lot of changes in a couple of weeks. And then it's like, oh, well, I'm never going to get there. I was just having this discussion with a client and they asked me literally the question, do you think I will ever actually get to where I want to be? And I'm like, that's such an open-ended question, because it's like, yeah, we all have this idea of what we want to look like in our mind. But I find that the longer that you do this, you kind of realize that, one, it's not really a realistic probably look that you're going after. And two, that's always changing and it's always evolving and it's always going to be something a little bit different, because when you kind of start going through those multiple cycles and you finally reach where you thought you want to be, you realize that that's not even almost close, right? Like you're like, oh, I can do so much more. And so it is, I think, really just trying to get them to focus on performance-based things, getting them to focus on the lifestyle of it, and that, that this just is a process, and that, ultimately this is about being the healthiest version of ourselves. Really, when it comes down to it, lifting weights, eating good food, and improving your mental clarity around this, it's about long-term health. Like that is the ultimate part of it. Aesthetics are just kind of an awesome side quest that we get along with it. And so it's, I think really trying to get their, focus to shift more long-term than just short-term. And that's not to say that we can't have these, you know, aesthetic short-term goals. I think they are good things to have. And there are times where, you know, we do want to be maybe a bit more serious and a bit more hardcore about it, and really see how we can push ourselves aesthetically. I think that those are good things, but again, you know, 2-3 years into this journey is just a drop in the drop of water in the bucket compared to the next 40 to 50 years of taking care of yourself, of lifting, and being with just in this whole lifestyle. So yeah, there's very much a blend of trying to get a lot of people to start looking more long term than just the short term, and there is certainly a fine balance to that, because it is a hard thing to do. Like, let's be honest, like, it's not like I want my best physique right now too. It's not like I'm not there as well. I've just had the benefit now of doing this for 10 to 15 years and now going, oh, okay, like I kind of get it a bit more. Whereas, you know, we maybe are working with a lot of people who have gained and lost the same 15, 20 pounds 6 different times. So, you know, there is going to always be that balance in trying to meld the two. But that's how I typically like to take it, and focus on a lot more of those things, and other wins as well, and lifestyle changes and habit changes, and you know, people going on vacation and like, okay, like I didn't feel like I had to binge, or I didn't, you know, gain a bunch of weight on my vacation like I typically do, or, you know, things like that. So yeah, I would say that's a lot of where I like to go with my clients.
Yeah. I know that this can be like tricky sometimes, but like focusing away from the scale, and I like, we're talking about body image, right? But sometimes taking check-in pictures can be really hard. It's probably the hardest part, honestly. So I like what I do, and what I tell my clients too is, if you're having a hard time taking check-in pictures, cut your head off. It like truly transforms the way, and maybe the way that you're like looking at your physique, like, and trying to like back up and like take that subjective view, whatever it is, you know, like that one. Cut your head off. And for those who are really struggling, just because pictures are like a good and important part of your progress as a coach and like looking at the type of thing, I tell my clients, if they're really having a hard time, send them to me and then delete them. And then what I'm able to do is like look back and forth, right? Why did my camera just go out of focus? Because it's important to focus on performance and how you're looking at food and your relationship with food and your relationship with others and all of those things. But when we are also looking at like body image and assessing, okay, like, have we been making progress, et cetera, it can be really hard to look at yourself in a different light. And I mean, like, cutting off your head is like a really easy way. I know it sounds silly, but like, I don't know.
It's a tool.
Yeah. Like,
Yeah.
I'll do that, and I'll cut off my head of different progress pictures, and then I'll like put them beside each other. Cause sometimes you're like, oh, look at my face. Or like, and like clients will say the same thing. Like in my check-in, in their, they're like, oh, I'm sorry for the morning face. I'm like, dude, I take my check-in pictures sometimes at like 5 a.m. Like, you want to see what I look like in my check-in pictures? Like, not pretty. Christina, you're on mute.
Ben was knocking at the door, so I had muted myself. You know, I've brought that up in check-in pictures too, though, because I think going back to like the whole attitude thing, if I have somebody who always submits them with like super grump face, or they just look like very annoyed in their pictures, I will literally be like, your homework next week is to send me a picture where you're smiling. Where
I have super grump face.
Oh, well, I mean, you know,
but I understand what you're meaning. Yeah.
Pictures at like 4:30 in the morning, and I used to take them down in the basement, so it would be like freezing, and I was not happy. But if I'm working with somebody on trying to improve, you know, the way that they're just viewing the whole situation, you know, maybe they got into having a coach because they were annoyed with their body. They felt out of control. There were all of these negative emotions. And then they took that step to say, I deserve to work on this. I deserve to have somebody support me here. Then I'll try to highlight that and be like, you should be smiling about the fact that you get to do this, because not all people can go out and afford a coach and bring that support system in. And that you get to say, like, I want to work on these kinds of things, and you should be proud of yourself for taking this step. And so even if it's a fake smile, I want you to put one on for our picture so that we can look back, because it is cool, right? When you've stuck with something and you do have that progress and you want to go back and look at the pictures, it's nice to have one where maybe you're smiling at yourself, even if that's not the body that you want to live in forever, as opposed to looking back and immediately seeing the face where it's like, wow, like I hated myself in that moment, or like I was so uncomfortable in that. And, I just think it helps sometimes, like the whole, how you feel about check-ins, how you feel about what you're going to do for the next week, if we just fake it till we make it with the smile sometimes.
Yeah. And plus, like the energy, when people talk negatively, like that energy does kind of drain us. When people go with like a frown, like interact with a frown, like that's energy that you're putting like out in the world and into yourself. So I feel like when people recognize like just a smile can go a long way, but it really can go a long way. Like it helps you to be a little more confident, even if you're having the crappiest day, like just smile or hug someone or laugh. Like those are positive chemicals that are going through your body, whether we think they are or not. I love that tool. I was going to say that a lot of the times with my clients, I'll ask them, where did it come from? Like if they're fixated on a certain body part, or they give me pictures and they're like, but I just want to look like this. And I'll say, okay, well, where did this, like having so much stock in what your body looks like, where did that start from? Right. And was there ever a place in your life that, like, not that you didn't care, but it wasn't your everything? And take me to like that place too, just to see kind of where, I guess, your sense of self was hijacked by something else, to kind of let it be distorted a little bit. And I like to go there to remind them that the person, so I just recently had a client, and it was such a good example of just like going back to see where things start. She, let's call her Sue. She has this like fixation around her hip area, and everything that she says is about like, my hips are big, like I always have this back fat that I'm going to have, it's never going to go away, it's like always negative. And then one time she was like, I sometimes wish that little Sue, like my 12, 13-year-old Sue self, was here during this check-in, because she wouldn't care. She would just go after her goals, and she would like eat healthy and like do her own thing and like have fun. And she always was smiling. And I had to like stop her and say, Sue didn't leave. Like little Sue is still you. Like you are still that person. So if that's what you remember, like having in that personality trait and that love for yourself, you like emulated that through your actions, like you did it once, you can still do it now. And at what point did we get like a little hiccup where like little Sue lost her voice a little bit? But now we can be like, oh wait, little Sue, like you're still here, and like turn up little Sue's voice, because that's you through and through, right? And I feel like we all have been there, like where we just are feeling ourselves, and that's not a different part, it's not a different person. Like the days that I'm feeling myself are, I'm still me, like I'm still Danica. So to be able to take that energy and say like, I still have that energy inside of me, I just need to make sure that I put more stock in that, and not allow all the negative like comparison game or the I'm not good enough take over. And that, I think, is where when people start to make that shift and realize, oh my gosh, I actually do have the power to do that, and I don't have to put so much stock in all of my physical self, like you guys were talking about other goals to have too, and to recognize like your body is not all that you are. Like there's a lot of that your body does. And like if your body is capable of like moving things or lifting things, like that's pretty freaking crazy. And you're able to like compute things and have articulated conversation that's really intellectual. Like your body's capable of more than just your physical self. So making sure that we don't just put all of our emphasis on like our physical being too is really important as well.
I love that, like, that person is still there in you, because that's a really important point. And like reminding, I feel like people struggle with reminding themselves about that, or those other positive things, or like that they actually have the capability of changing their thoughts around their bodies and themselves, and how they can respond to things. Something that I feel like happens a lot when people are very like fixated on their physique and are like very like negative, like in that negative space, is they'll look at themselves in the mirror a lot and they'll body check, is kind of, or they'll like avoid the mirror. But you usually, let's say, have a mirror like when you're getting ready in the morning or something like that. Something that a tool that I've used with some of my clients is like, hey, make like affirmations or like daily messages about you can, or you are, or you have, like you have control, or like I have control, like more like statements about them, like I statements or you can statements, and put it on a post-it and put it on the mirror. Because then you're actually seeing it every day, because it's that reminder that like I can do hard things, I am in charge of my thoughts, I have blah blah blah, like whatever that statement is that you maybe want to shift or emulate, or if it's something that is empowering but uncomfortable for you to say out loud about yourself, then it probably means that you need to work on that. So write it on a post-it and like put it on a mirror, because that can help remind you if you find that you're body checking a lot, or if you're just like getting ready in the morning or whatever, and you can see it, right? Instead of, body checking yourself and like looking at yourself in the mirror, you can actually look at this statement about yourself and remind yourself like, oh, I have the capability to make a different choice here, and then like move on from that situation.
Yeah, that brings in different habits too, like better habit building. And a lot of the times I'll have my clients, if they notice that one habit, so say it's measuring, like if they're measuring themselves all the time, and I notice that like it's just becoming toxic, like it's bringing this negative energy and negative thoughts, then disrupt that, like take that pattern completely out and put something else in. So mirror work too, it's like you're constantly, oh, I wake up, I brush my teeth, and as I'm brushing my teeth, I like turn to the back to see, oh, yep, I just look at the cellulite or whatever you want to say. But like, that's like a habit. Don't look in the mirror, like brush your teeth downstairs where like you can't really get up that far or whatever it may be. Or put so many sticky notes in front that, when I brush my teeth, I can't even see myself. I just,
like my bathroom mirror hits my legs at a place where mentally it doesn't look good for me. Like I don't feel like I look good when I look in the bathroom mirror if I'm checking like my outfit, right? So I will go to a full length a mirror, and so then I can actually see it. So for like basically what you said, don't look at yourself in a place where you're like I know in my bathroom mirror it doesn't hit me flattering or whatever in my brain. Like I know that, so I choose not to do that, and I choose to go to someplace else or ask Bob, like, hey, what do you think about this? Because he'll usually say yes, because he's a good husband. It looks great. You look great in anything. No, but like, you know what I mean? It's just, if you find that you are doing a negative behavior like that, that's a habit. Yeah, change it.
Yeah. And I talked about this too, about like auditing the influence around you. And like, we have control over that. So if you notice that you like send your check-ins and it's not going the way that you want, and you're body checking yourself, and then all of a sudden you go on Instagram and you're like going through all the fitness accounts and like then comparing yourself, what are you doing? Like, this is not benefiting you at all. There's no benefit of like being in a negative headspace and then feeding into it, like enabling it to just spiral. And then like you put on the tight clothes because you want to know if you still fit into that like whatever size jeans that you're trying to get, and it doesn't fit because that isn't we're not at the goal yet. And then you get even more mad. Like, it's just like you're doing these patterns that like don't serve you well. So if you're able to kind of take a minute, okay, not really feeling myself today. I could choose this path, which is typically a path that I would choose because it seems like it's a good one, even though it's not. Or I can challenge myself in this moment, press send, and like go do something completely different, like go for a walk outside, talk to a friend, like do something completely different. Then you start to disrupt that pattern, and then you recognize that you don't have to have it be all about that like one body image negative moment for the rest of your day and let it dictate the rest of your interactions or the rest of the energy that you're going to have for that day. It just takes that split moment to be like, pause, check myself, challenge it, and then redirect.
Yeah, in terms of like clothing too, because you did mention like some clothing or whatever. And it very much depends on the person's goal, but I find that if like you are someone who is trying to get down to a certain size and you have a thing in your closet that you used to fit into, and maybe it's a goal, and that's okay. Like, I'm not saying that this is a bad idea, but if you find that you are always focused on that piece of clothing and you look at it every day, and then you're looking at, or you're feeling in your body, like, I'm disgusting, I can't fit in that, da, 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 da. Like, I've found, let's say in situations where, like I'm not in my prep body, which is the majority of the time, if I have clothes that maybe only fit me when I was in prep, I got rid of them because that doesn't serve me. Like, I found that I was like looking at those articles of clothing and going like, oh, I wish that I could fit in that. Whereas that was actually a really negative connotation for me, because when I fit in that, that was not a sustainable body. And I felt like crap. So like, why am I going to look at that every day when I know that that's not going to fit me probably ever again? So like, get rid of them. Or like, anyways, I don't have a nor. Never mind. But like, yeah, like assessing again, like your environment and the things that you are exposed to every day. If you have articles of clothing in your closet that are maybe like, it's okay to have goal pieces, let's say, like, oh, I have a pair of jeans that I want to fit in again. That's okay. But as long as that goal is like something that's realistic and more positive in nature, rather than something that is not realistic and just eating at you every day.
Right. Like, why are you torturing yourself with it?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, I wound up doing that. I had jeans that fit me before having Claire that I was like, I want to get back into these ones, but I've had them for years. And so the funny part is like, now they're like a different rise than I would even want to wear. Like, anyway.
I have a pair in my,
They're not in fashion anymore.
Well, I mean, now who knows?
jeans.
All these kids out there trying to make us, you know, wear low-rise jeans these days.
I have low-rise bell-bottom jeans. Like,
See,
why are
they're cool again? They're cool again. You know, and so I had these jeans, and every now and then when we would go out on a date night, because they were like date night jeans, you know, that made you feel good, I would go and try and squeeze into them. And I got to the point where like they buttoned and they zipped, but if I sat down at dinner, they were not going to stay that way. So they didn't actually fit, right? But I would go and try them on and it would piss me off. And like, and I'm sure there's some way to like spin this negatively, like too, but I would much rather keep trying on, like in a fat loss phase, my normal clothes and have them feel too big than keep trying to squeeze into pants that are too small, hoping that at some point they're going to feel comfortable. Like, I'd rather get to a place where I keep putting on the ones that have fit and then be like, oh no, time for new jeans, than to keep trying on a torturous old pair that make you get in your head of like, well, they used to fit, and like, why am I not doing as good as I used to be? And like things like that, because it might just be that life is completely different. It might, there could be a million different things going into there. And so I think if you have a goal piece around, like, a funny that, having posing bikinis and stuff like that, because I have some lifestyle clients that like to order the cute ones for their pictures and stuff. That's something that if I was sending check-in pictures right now, I am not putting on my posing bikini. Like, that's not a world I need to be in. And I had a client that was like, if my goal is to compete in like a year, should I start sending pictures in my competition suit? And I was like, no, that's a quick way to feel like we're never going to get there. And for you
That
to
suit's meant
feel
to fit you in a
frustrated.
very different body.
Right. And if we're not even trying to diet yet, which means that potentially you could end up putting on this piece of clothing that is just going to make you feel like shit every time you put it on. And we're not even supposed to fit into it. Like, that is a tailored item that's supposed to fit you when you are in a bizarre place of life. And like, we don't need to do that to ourselves. And so I like to try and avoid the like goal pieces like more often than not, because I'd rather have people put on something. Like for my check-in pictures now, I put on the bikini that makes me feel best when I take my kids to the water park. And then that way, like, I do feel good in those pictures that I take. I can smile in them and things like that. And if it gets too big, I'll buy a new bikini. But I'd rather put that on than one that's going to cut into me and then make me look at the picture and be like, oh, look at the way that my fat like spills over the like hip of that, or look at how tight it is on like my back. Cause then you start to notice those things more. And so I just feel like it gives a better spin all around sometimes, like depending on the mindset of the person, to just.
I think too, there is like a time when you are able to have those pieces, like when you start to, if you notice that certain things once maybe triggered you, and then you can get to a really good place where, at least I know this to be true for myself. If I step on the scale now, I'm like, I'm feeling a little bloated. I'm so sorry. My kiddos in the background.
I don't hear anything.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, baby. I will be right there, okay? And this is parenting. Not 101. This is not parenting 101.
Not 101.
Survival mode.
This is not 101. But I think that it's okay sometimes to get into a space where you are able to do that stuff. And it can be, at least for myself, I know that like now I'm far removed where it doesn't have that much of an impact on me, where I have like these one white jeans that are like amazing white jeans, but it's hilarious to try them on because one butt cheek might fit into those white jeans, but two definitely is not going to fit. And it's comical to me at this point. Like when I try to put them on, I'm like, funny, like it's funny and it's not. At one point, it probably was like, oh my gosh, what is happening? Like, it's not working. I'm a failure. Like at one point, it probably was that. Or even swimsuits. Like I have swimsuits, one pieces that maybe were cheeky at one point, and now they're like complete thong at this point. And I just walk around in front of my husband like, all right, this is what happened. Like, I don't even have to buy a new one. I just bought a thong version now. So we're good to go. But I think that being able to check like where your body image is and where your comfort level is, and maybe at one point the things that like don't serve you well now and provide more toxic energy, at some point there may be, and we hope that they don't provide you so much toxic energy, right? Like when it comes to like the scale, I think that's a big one for people, or even mirror checking, like that's a big one. At some point, we hope that it doesn't hold you captive to who you truly are and just strips you away from all like living and thriving, right? Like we hope that that's what we want to be able to encourage you to develop, so you can step on the scale, and if it goes up, it goes up. If it doesn't, it doesn't. If it stays the same, whatever. you can try on the suit and you're like, all right, not today. And like, let it go. It doesn't like dictate the rest of your world as you see it, right? So I think being able to recognize like when you are in those good headspaces, and then on top of that, being able to be like, I've made some progress. Like, I'm really proud of myself that I've made progress with my own image of like how I see myself, how I carry myself and view myself, just as it pertains to me, not what anyone else kind of defines for me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's sorry, go ahead, Tyler.
Okay. I was gonna just even say, like, with the scale and when people do come with that, like, I think it's just so important too, to like, along the lines of what we've been talking about, remind them like the scale does not change who you are as a person. It does not dictate who you are, how you interact with people, and how you interact with the world around you. Like, I think I've said this before, but I think it's, worth repeating, is that like, I'll kind of tell people is like, the scale is just a piece of machinery where you take a shit. Like that's all that it is, right? Like it kind of like brings some like levity to, or, some kind of, joke to it, where it's like, okay, like that's all that this is. Like, it's just your relation to gravity at this moment, and it's just sitting where you poop. Like that's all that it is. And it kind of then can like shift that perception a little of like, oh yeah, okay, like it really isn't that big of a deal. And I tell them that like, you may be this weight again, but guess what? Your body composition might be 180 degrees different. Like I've been 180 pounds. I've been 235 pounds. I've been 190 pounds multiple times. And every time it's different. And guess what? That's going to happen with you as well. And so again, I think it's, yeah, trying to get away from some of those superficial things and really focusing on what we kind of talked about of yourself, who you are as a person. Your body composition is going to change over time. And again, yeah, just trying to shift that perception as we're going along this journey together, because again, yeah, it's going to be this lifelong journey that you're on, and we are working on those mental shifts.
Yeah, people do say too, how do I do that though? Like how do I get out of this, like letting this dictate, like the number on the scale dictate my happiness? Or like, how do I change that? Like how do I not think about my body 24/7? And like, that's a hard conversation to have, because it's all different and depends on like each person's environment and their upbringing and everything like that. But sometimes I will say, like, if you were to look at like your life and the percentage of time and thoughts, like all of our thoughts that you're spending here, and look at all the other important parts in your life, like, do you think that that equates the way that you want it to? And if not, can we make some changes? Like, even if it's just taking 2% away from like the body image and putting it into like communication, and can you do that? And then eventually it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and you're going to not invest so much energy into the things that just aren't serving you well. And it does take time, right? I mean, body image doesn't, like, the fixation on body image doesn't happen overnight for most individuals. The extent of it and the intensity of it, it takes a while for that to develop. So it's going to take a little bit of time for it to kind of undevelop, right? And to develop new thought patterns. So don't give up. Like, I don't want people to be like, that this is just who I am, and it was written in the stars that I'm always going to focus on this. And no, like, you can change just as you developed these thought patterns. Like, you can undevelop them, and you can develop even better ones now. And this is part of the process of like having a coach to support that, right? We want to encourage all the healthy behavior changes, but also the mental and emotional pieces too. And I bet you, if you're working on that stuff with your coach, you're probably going to see aesthetic goals happen as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's important to acknowledge that bodies change. Like,
Yeah.
bodies change. We get older, we have babies, we, move countries, you have injuries, you navigate health complications. Like there's a lot of things that go into every person's body, and just remembering that the grass isn't always greener on the other side. You know, I'm sure I'm not alone when I'll have consultations or people say that they want to get back to this body, whatever that body was, like pre-pregnancy or when I was 30, because now I'm 50, or, you know, whatever. And it's like, well, okay, I understand that, but like, you're probably not going to be that person again. And that can be sad, I guess, because it could be, right? But it could be also empowering, as in now you get to be this person. And like you were saying, Danica, like that, like little Susie or Sue or whoever that was, that person is still there. Like that old, like that old you is still within you, whatever that is. But like now you also get to like formulate a new relationship with where you're at right now. And like be that best person, that higher self where you are now. And that doesn't make it better or worse. That just, it means that, you know, your body's changed. Like we were talking about clothing, and I just bought some new shorts, and I bought them in a size medium, and I don't know if I've ever owned a pair of like medium athletic shorts, to be honest. I've always been small. And so I was like, oh my gosh, am I going to order mediums? Blah, blah, blah. Like I went and tried them on in the store. But they just like fit me way better. And I was like, you know what? Fuck it. I would much rather wear mediums, because who the fuck knows that they're mediums also, except for me. And like, whatever. Now I don't feel like using negative language, but a sausage in my small like shorts. I feel way more comfortable. So like, that's okay, because that's where my body is now. And I feel way more confident in wearing a size that's different than what I mentally thought. And I feel like we also get clients who will say, I want to be like, throwing the number out there, 120 pounds, right? Or they'll like have that numerical value. And that's okay to, again, like we're going back to like that clothing situation where it's okay to have these goals, but you also have to know that like you might get there and realize that that's not where you actually physically want to be. And just to realize like, that's okay. Body's changed.
Yeah.
You brought up something interesting that I've had a lot of these calls lately, and I'm curious to see what you guys say about it, because I'll ask somebody like, okay, so what have you been doing recently, right? Like in regards to like activity, like cardio or training, or even with food or whatever. And I feel like a lot lately I've been getting responses, and I'll make sure to say like recently, like I'm trying to gather what is their body used to in this moment that we need to make adjustments from. And it'll be somebody who's in their like 40s or 50s, and they'll start telling me about how they were a college athlete. And when they were in college, they ran 7 hours a week and weightlifted and things like that. Or I've had people
2015, I was able to do this.
Exactly. I literally spoke to somebody where they were like, well, in 2020, and started telling me about stuff. And while like this can give me a good indication of like getting back to like what, you know, little Susie was capable of and like things like that, or who they are like in them. If you were a college athlete, like, okay, I know the things that you're capable of. I know you can like get through on certain things and you have this work ethic. And so that does tell me something about you. But if we go from a conversation of, well, I was a college athlete 35 years ago and I did all of these things, but now I don't do any of those things. I'm not going to, I feel like a lot of times what I'll hear is like, they want to go back to being that person with those capabilities and stuff. And I'm not going to say, well, because you were a college track athlete 30 years ago, let's go out and run some like 100-meter sprints every day. And we're going to start doing hurdles.
Do the beep test.
Yeah, because like things are things are different. And like, it's hard because like at a certain, it's like, that's not super relevant anymore. And if we're stuck, and like, I have this conversation with moms a lot too, where my bone structure is literally like different than it was 4 kids ago.
Yep.
And I have gotten to a better, like a place I liked better after each kid. So this is not me saying you can't get to a place where you're super excited about your body post children or something. But if I were to be like, I just want my body back, or I don't, you guys have probably heard this too, where people will say like, I just want to look like I did when I was 22 or something. And they're like 35 or 40. And it's like, but this is like, we live in a different world now, like in a different body. And sometimes I think that holding on to like that stuff, that can be like a different form of like the clothing torture, where it's like, okay, but if when you were 19, you had no other responsibilities besides making sure that you could perform well at your practices, and your coaches and your teachers and your whole life revolved around eating and training and prioritizing that. And now you have a full-time job and 3 kids and 2 dogs, and you have to work on a house and you're picking up a side gig. Things are not the same. And if you try to hold yourself to those same standards and be like, why can't I just get back to the way I looked then? Or why can't I perform the way I did then? It's like, because we need to look at trying to optimize who we are now and being happy in like the 2023 body, and what is this one capable of accomplishing, as opposed to like anchoring ourselves to something that we need to be like, wow, that version of me was very awesome. I'm happy I was her. That's cool. How can I use that work ethic and that commitment and that consistency to be something I think is really cool today?
Yeah, it can be like trying to put a round peg in a square hole. Like
Right.
you're trying to do something where maybe you're at a period in your life where it's just the reality based off of your expectations. They're not coinciding. Like myself, for example, like I hopped into a prep this year. It was my first time since 2018. I quickly realized a few months in, this wasn't what I want in my life. I want to be able to go out with, my daughter for dinner. I want to go get ice cream on a hot summer day. Like, and I think that is also, a route to talk with clients about is, where is your life at? Maybe we're not ready for this. And that could actually then be hurting our body image because we have these expectations, but our reality just does not work with that. And that can be reinforcing. And again, so now we can shift that perception of, hey, you know what? I can be pretty happy here. I can maintain, I can focus on some performance goals, and I can still have that lifestyle that I want. Because I've also had clients where it's like, hey, I want to drop 20, 30 pounds. We'll start, but then they're not maybe willing to change certain aspects about their lifestyle. They're like, well, why can't I do this? Okay, well, now we need to reconsider maybe that goal and shift how we're thinking about our body image, what we want to actually look like in relation to how we want to have our lifestyle. I think that's also, yeah, a pretty important thing to consider as well.
That goes back to
Yeah.
what Danica said before with like taking that time to look at that and being like, okay, this is cool that I can do this. And I've made some headway on my space with myself, because I've kind of done the same thing where like, I want to lose maybe like a couple of pounds, but I know the life I want to lead right now is not one where I want to get back to being super lean, because I don't want to do the things it took. I'm not in that place right now. And it's been nice to, like, instead of beating myself up for that and being like, why can't you be, because I've done that before. Why
I
can't
just
you
feel
be
guilty.
motivated like that? Why can't you want to go do that much cardio and things? And instead being able to be like, I'm pretty excited about the body that can have, too many drinks at Taylor Swift, and that can go to margaritas and like Mexican and things like that, and still look and feel this way. And so it is a cool mindset shift to like instead look at the mirror and be like, hey, you look pretty cool for doing whatever you want a lot of the times.
You don't need to be shredded 100% of the time. I think,
Right.
yeah, I think a lot of lifestyle clients, they can see such an extreme end of the spectrum of like the competitive side and sub 10% body fat. And I think a lot of times we have to remind them, like, you're not competitors. Like, we're like, we can work towards that goal, but like, I think we have to realize that's a whole different thing here that we're going to be working on. And yeah, I think getting happy with that body, with that lifestyle, like having the margaritas, like in the Mexican food, like let's go do that. That's honestly, that's way better anyways, because guess what? You can look good and have your cake most of the time too. And that's a pretty cool place to be. It's a lot more fun than abs, I can tell you that.
I just shared on my Instagram story, like, because I posted a picture and then I realized that sometimes that picture was getting the attention that I was not intended. And it was a picture of me in prep. And I was the most self-conscious when I was stage lean, like the most, and not comfortable because you're bony as fuck, because you don't have body fat. Or I mean, you do, but like you don't. And like that is not a body that I wanted to live in. And people don't realize like that's not a strong body. That's not a capable body physically, mentally. Like you're tired, you have no sex drive.
I was thinking about that. You look like you probably want to do that all the time. It's
right.
the last thing you want to do.
But it's not. And even Bob will be like, I don't like you stage lean. That is his least favorite, I guess, physical look. Because you don't look good. Like you literally don't look good except when you're on stage. And only people who have been stage lean understand that. I mean, I can show pictures of what I also look like, not in the gym, and like you look weird. And I'm like my most hyper fixated self when I'm that lean, because you live in that world. Like the more fixated on your like diet and cardio and training, et cetera, the more fixated you will become on your body, especially if you go in. And I know that we're the lifestyle series, but if you go into the bodybuilding route, because I've had clients be like, oh, I don't want to compete, but I want to get that lean. And I'm like, well, no, you don't. Because one, it's not healthy. Like it's not healthy and it's not comfortable. It's not sustainable. It's not fun. But you become more fixated a lot of times. And that's why whenever I'm talking to a client about a fat loss phase, maybe one where we are getting lifestyle shredded, I'm like, we need to really be talking about your perception around food and your body at this point, because you do become fixated on that things just naturally, because those are the like those are some of the data points that you're looking at. And it's super cool when you get really lean, because you can see all of these like striations and your different muscles and how your body responds to things is really fascinating. And it's really cool, but it's also not fun. And like I said, I would always cover myself up, like in bigger clothes, because I felt like a child and I did not feel feminine. So, there's that.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think another question to ask people as they go into their goals is, okay, what are you not willing to sacrifice? Like, what are you not willing to let go of? And at the expense of what are you willing to go after these goals? Like, what are you not willing to sacrifice? What are you okay with sacrificing? Because
that's a hard question, because sometimes people don't think about it and they're like, everything.
Don't.
And you're like,
oh yeah, like my left toe, my left big toe. And I'm like, are you though?
And we have
like,
bigger problems.
Are you? And if that's the case, then we really need to set up some mindset sessions.
Like we need to dive into this. We need to have conversations.
But I think it is important to recognize and to have, like, you can start a program and be like all about it. And then if you're I like to do these like checks of, okay, what are we sacrificing? Like, are there some areas of in your life that like are on the totem pole, and are we sacrificing any of those? And how are we feeling about that sacrifice? Like, are we okay with it? Are we feeling a certain way? Is it misaligning with like our authentic self? Like, how are we feeling? Because body image can and perception of, I know that we were talking about like body image and like the perception of ourselves, and is it actually true? But sometimes if we're so fixated on that area, it's going to come with sacrifice. And you might start to realize like, no, I'm actually not engaged in social events, and and sometimes that just happens. Like, it's not like a conscious thing, but you realize like you don't communicate with people as much. You're not as socially involved. Your interaction is more like all about body instead of like other things happening in the world. So at the sacrifice of what is really important, and then to check yourself halfway too.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's, I don't know. That's a
I've
good.
had a client before who, with her fat loss phase, she was like, I have these big goals that I want to hit. I will not give up date night with my husband where I don't want to have to think about giving up anything. And she was like, we order an appetizer and entrees, and I have like at least 2 cocktails, if not 3, and we share dessert. And it was one of those things where it was like, cool, I'm super okay with you having that night if that fills your cup. And this was every single week. If that's what like is important for you as a human, for your relationship with food, for your relationship with your husband, this is fantastic. And we can still get there as long as we are, dialed in the rest of the time. And I feel like that goes back to being able to look at things where you're looking at, like, so she reached her goal, right? We just recently had the event that we were dieting for, and we've started adding food back in. And what's been great, and I think it helped having that time where she could let her hair down and not feel like must take away all joy for me to get there, was that she's like, I'm really excited that I'm maintaining these numbers and that this like body is hanging out when I'm letting my hair down with more stuff. And so I think having that like one exercise in there, and I'll add that in with clients too, where I had somebody recently was like, we're going to have this meal out with people, and like, I shouldn't be a part of it at all. Right. Like with stuff, and I should pack things and everything. I was like, no, like, I think this is a really important opportunity for you to see that you don't need to live in like sad food land, and go enjoy that. And then the next day, you're not going to get on the scale and get mad at yourself. You're not going to examine yourself in the mirror. We're not going to do extra cardio. We're not going to take away food. We're just going to move on and say like, I'm just as cool and just as important to everything and can do all the cool things. That one meal didn't ruin me as a human being, because a lot of people can get caught in that spiral of like, well, shit, I like went out and I ate things I wasn't supposed to. I'm a terrible person. I can't do anything right. I'm not successful at anything. Everybody hates me. And it's like, whoa, it was a slice of pizza, man. Like, it's not that big of a deal. And that's why, like, I've seen, people post the thing about like when people call it a cheat meal, and it's like, you didn't cheat on your spouse. You did not rob a bank. You did not like do any of these other things where like you cheated the system or something. You ate some food, and like, I don't have to look at it as this, like, you're bad. Like, it's the sin thing.
And that's that language again too, right? Like that language, like if you say that it's a cheat, okay, well, automatically that means like, usually the word cheat means something more negative. So going back to like our first like point is, look at the language that you are using with things and your choices. And that's the thing too. It's a choice, and that's okay, right? Like you have the capability of that. And knowing that it, like Danica said, it doesn't happen overnight. It's not going to be like, oh, you know what, you're all fixed now. You're going to have times. Yeah, it's better. You're going to have times that are going to be like, quote unquote, better in terms of your mindset and moving on. And then you're going to have times where you're like, I overdid that. And you have to check yourself on not having the scale beat you up. Or if you know that the scale is going to beat you up, just don't step on it. Whatever. Or like, okay, I overdid it at Bob and I's anniversary dinner on the weekend. Cool. You know what I'm going to do the next day? Just like drink some water and chill out and not look at myself in the mirror so much, because I knew that I would be like, oh, I'm so blah, 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 when I knew that it was just like, hey, I had some glasses of wine and lots of sodium and ate a little too much and I need to take a shit. Like, that's it. Like, really. So you have to like check yourself on your behaviors and the way that you're talking to yourself, and to help you move on. And that's how you move on, and that's how you build up that practice and that resiliency in those situations.
And giving yourself grace too, I think, is really important. Like being able to recognize that if you're like diving into the quicksand, like on purpose, like I can't wait to just get sucked in here, then we have some more work to do. But if like you fall into the quicksand and you're like, oh, all I have to do to get out of this is like breathe and like look at my like surroundings, what can best support me here, and like wiggle my way out, then that is progress. And like you're gonna fall sometimes, you're gonna trip, you're gonna have body image days, you're going to slip up a little bit. That is okay. We are human beings. We talked about AI in the very beginning, I think we were off, but we're still all humans. So we're gonna have a little bit of hiccups that happen. It's the amount to which we stay stuck like in the quicksand or in the mud that really makes a difference. If like we're only finding that we get a little bit dirty now and then, but we're fine with it afterwards, then we're good. Like we're making progress.
I love it.
One last thing here is like shifting just that perceptive of how we view food. Food is awesome. It is tasty. It is delicious. So many of just like even like some of my memories throughout life is surrounded just by good meals and good people, and like with your friends just cooking, getting together, heavy cream, heavy butter, and just having a good meal. And I think too, like we kind of also need to have that focus as well, as that not everything just has to be like Christina was saying in sad food land. Like the opportunity to like, you know, get around a table with like loved ones and just have a meal without really even thinking about what's in it, how much you're consuming, and just enjoying that moment, I think also is just so important as well.
And what a privilege, right?
Yeah.
Like people don't get that opportunity to sit around like a family table and eat anything. So when we start to, I could go in a whole nother thing about this, but I just feel like be grateful for opportunities that we do have, and try not to just strip away the joy with every opportunity that comes your way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think that's a good like place to close, and that like your head should be a place that you want to hang out in. And if you're the one ruining that room, figure it out, because you're the only one that's going to be able to fix it. And so like if you're tearing yourself down routinely, like that's a genius place to start, like cleaning house and trying to see if we can just fix that and want to hang out with ourselves again.
Yeah. Absolutely.
All right, friends. Well, I think that was a lot of fun. That was a really good one. And considering like it's a heavy topic, it wound up being like upbeat and good. And I'm really excited about this one. So
yeah.
I always forget all the things, Jess, right? Like, well, first of all, leave us a review, please. Like, that'd be really cool. And you can find all of our information should be listed wherever like where you're listening. And then also on YouTube, everyone's like Instagram tags and everything is there. And if you have any other ideas for us about what you want to hear us chat about, please let me know. And we'll talk to you guys next time.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.